And Todd, I'm going to put you right in the middle of this because, your organization often is kind of right in the middle between, planning and big picture stuff and folks that are trying to get a very specific project built. So where do you see opportunities kind of for improvement in that process, and, what can we do? What can our clients do?
That is a good question. I think Alan was saying that, really understanding each neighborhood. We are a city of micro neighborhoods. Like, I live on Eureka Street in Noe Valley, but my neighbors call it Eureka Valley. And I'm like, oh, I thought it was Noe Valley. No, this street's Eureka Valley. I'm like, oh, okay. And so we really, San Francisco, if you're building on 24th Street in Noe Valley, right, you got to make sure you speak to Deb Neiman, who's head of the Community Benefit District. You got to make sure you speak to Bob Rodman, who's head of the Merchant Association. It's really kind of having that local expertise, neighborhood by neighborhood. In Hayes Valley, you got to speak to Gail Ball in the Hayes Valley Neighborhood Association, right? They have very, very strong opinions about the amount of parking that's going to be in their building, and they're going to come out to 150 neighborhood meetings to express that opinion. That's kind of the culture of San Francisco. We're an over-involved neighbors. I mean, that's what we are, and I think I don't see that changing. Like, I just don't. I think fight, like, kind of, you can go outside and scream at the rain if you want to and be like, this isn't fair, it's ridiculous. Yeah, it's not fair, it's ridiculous, and it leads to really expensive units. The process gets dragged out and all this, but that's what we are in San Francisco. So I don't know how to change. I don't think there is a way to change that dynamic. I really think it's more of a meta, like, is the city, and I think it is moving in a really good direction, embracing a stronger, more pro-housing policy. So, there's kind of the bigger stuff, and then there's the little neighborhood by neighborhood issue. And really, I don't know how an outside developer, someone who's not in San Francisco, comes here and does stuff. Like, we are, for a big city, we're really a very small town, or a bunch of little small towns.
Very, very much so. And one of the things that's come up a couple times is this issue of, neighborhood control and then also regional control. And, you can look at that at kind of the regional level. Well, each of these cities is making decisions that are optimized for themselves and therefore make it a disaster for everyone. But if we were to kind of apply that same logic at the city level, it gets very controversial, which is, are district elections a good thing, or are they part of what has led to this? The city of San Francisco seeing itself as 11 unique supervisorial districts with their own solutions, or are we one city? How has that dynamic played into what you've seen over the last couple of decades? Does anyone want to touch that one first? Everyone's looking at the planning guy.
Well, I joined the planning department right after district elections came into effect, so I don't really know what it was like to be a planner in San Francisco before that. I would say the supervisors are generally pretty deferential to each other in terms of plans and zoning in their own districts, and if the district supervisor supports it, then generally all the rest of the supervisors will fall in line. It's when you get to the citywide kind of housing policy conversations where you see the differences. For our Central Summit Plan, if Jane Kim supports it, I can't see any of the other supervisors opposing it. And vice versa. When we do plans that straddle multiple districts, then it gets a little messier. Fortunately, most of our plans have fallen squarely in one supervisorial district or another. I would say, it is good to have supervisors who think broadly. If I had my druthers and I was going to recreate our system, maybe I would add a couple at-large supervisors to the system and keep it more or less as it is, to just add folks who are by nature not thinking about a particular neighborhood. I don't know that I would go back to a whole at-large system, but I don't know what it was like.
I think that's a good point, to have a few that are at large. But sometimes I look at South of Market. Years ago, when we worked on the first building in '91, people would say, I like your building, but I don't want to live south of Market. And I think of how Delancey Street was built. It would never get approved today in that neighborhood or remember there was Steamboat back then, and even I live on Russian Hill, but there's a North Point Apartments, that would probably never get approved today because of the neighbors. So I do wonder if it does stymie getting approvals and just.
And I would just say, it also means that we generally, as the planning department, won't really undertake a planning process in a new neighborhood if the supervisor is not supportive of at least engaging in that process. So, I think you see us doing stuff generally where the supervisor at least is supportive of us starting. Generally, this take longer than any person's term, so that it carries on often to the next official. But we don't try to run headlong into headwinds, from the get-go.
I also think that it's interesting if you look at kind of the history of who's been pro-density on housing, right? You were talking about Rincon, that was Chris Daly when he was a supervisor. Chris Daly, the ultimate firebrand of the far San Francisco left, was a very pro-density guy. Today in City Hall, it's the political party of the San Francisco moderates who tend to be much more pro-density, pro-housing, but it started with the political party of the San Francisco progressives. So, and I think that from a citywide perspective, right, we tend to elect people from the moderate political party in San Francisco. But, from a housing point of view, I guess if history tells us anything, it can flip-flop between which political party is actually supporting density of housing and which isn't. It's kind of one of this interesting phenomena to me that the so-called progressive political party are about let's not build anything new. Let's pour the amber over the city and be like, it's great. And the so-called moderates are like, no, we need to, obviously it doesn't work 100%, but I think in general that's a fairly accurate view of a snapshot of today's politics.
Yes. When did the progressives ever advocate for the status quo, right? Yesterday was perfect. Christy Darlene, kind of in this regional kind of city neighborhood tension, and what has Spur seen, or what does Spur advocate for at that level?
I think how you open this in terms of the tragedy of the commons, of how each city, understandably every community wants to have a voice in how they develop and grow, but that doesn't necessarily lead to the best decisions for the region at large. And part of that is about our tax policy, Prop 13, other state level things around how our dollars are distributed and what their incentives are to what they each should be want to approve. And part of it is about community character and things like that. So I did just write a blog post about Brisbane Baylands, and that being a prime example of anyone who is not from Brisbane looks at that and says, yes, this is a place where this makes sense to have mixed use, to have housing and jobs. There's great transit that's there. There's a vision. It is adjacent to San Francisco and Daly City, and that has residences. It is adjacent to a major development project, the Schlage Lock development that's being done by the same developer. There's a lot of reasons why it makes sense to be building here and not at not sprawling at the edges of the Bay Area. But you can understand why, if you're from that community that is basically the same size in terms of population as what that development will be, that might be a little intimidating. And so I think that there are conversations at the regional level about how we can change our incentive structure, make better decisions. But I think it's going to be hard. MTC and ABAG, which are the Metropolitan Transportation Commission and the Association of Bay Area Governments, are regional agencies. They're merging and having a lot of trouble with that. And I think they have all the right intentions, but they are governed by electeds from each community. So it is hard to see. I'm trying to be an optimist, but it's hard to see how we'll be able to make some far-reaching decisions. And I know Josh follows this more closely than I do, so maybe you can weigh in too.
Yeah, we'll see. Our MTC and ABAG are in the process of merging. And so this is an opportunity to rethink kind of regional governance.
So MTC standing for?
Metropolitan Transportation Commission and ABAG, Association of Bay Area Governments. MTC basically is the body with all the purse strings for transportation in the Bay Area, and thus they have some power. ABAG is more of a kind of a think tank about population and growth, and they don't have a whole lot of power, but they are the kind of the land use side of it. And so now they're going to be merging, and so it's a question of how to rethink the governance of this and what their charge is and all of that. So it's kind of a little bit of a watershed moment for the region to think about how the dynamics might change, and hopefully it's not just basically every city in the region gets a seat at the table. In San Francisco and Oakland and San Jose are kind of the minority amongst the Nevados and Brisbanes of the world, of the region, and so hopefully a more urban agenda can come out of it.
Darlene, anything you want to add kind of on the regional level as folks are looking at this area, or what questions do people look at, like, really, why is it like this?
They really say, why is it like this, and how come San Francisco's only San Francisco, and you guys aren't managing like Brisbane and South City and all that stuff? So we do get that question all the time, but my biggest concern is when I'm working with developers, and as a result, we're trying to work with different governments. For example, Brisbane, they don't want to build any more housing, and we're saying, why not? And then when a developer is telling me, Darlene, we're trying to get it approved, I said, forget it. Why the heck are you guys wasting your time? But that's all the comment I have.
If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all, right?
So can I?
Yes.
So the mayor of Brisbane, I don't know if people read this about a year ago. The mayor of Brisbane, when the Baylands was being discussed, he said, "We'll build jobs. San Francisco can provide the housing." Yeah, that was his quote. 4,500 units, 4,400 units of housing in transit first. Transit first place right off of 101. It is a once in a generation opportunity. It is a no-brainer. And the San Francisco Housing Action Coalition has been really advocating strongly for the housing component of Brisbane. And we go down to the city council meetings when they're discussing it, and it is exactly what you picture it to be. It's people going like, 4,400 units, it's not going to solve the problem. It's not going to solve the problem. And finally, I'd had it, and I stood up and I was like, you know what? I'm like, you're right, 4,400 units is not going to solve it. But if you guys do 4,400 units, and Berkeley does 4,500 units, and Atherton does, now we're getting somewhere. So regionally, what we really need to be advocating for is every group doing its part, every municipality. And that is really something that I think is one of the great things about Senator Wiener's SB 35, is it says that if you are, you telling me to stop? Oh, I'm sorry. That if Senator Wiener's SB 35, if you're doing your part as a municipality, it doesn't affect you at all. Right? It's like you're doing your part, you're doing great. It's if you're blocking the building of housing, that's when the state would step in and streamline.
So let's back up here for a sec, because we kind of glossed over this, but I think it's important. The mayor of Brisbane says, San Francisco, you build the housing, we'll give them jobs. Why, right? So we could build housing, we could build jobs, we could build a shopping center, right? So, property tax, payroll tax, or sales tax, what's the perverse incentive there to want the jobs but not the housing?
You get a lot more money without having to provide services if you do jobs and not housing. You don't have to build schools, Yeah.
Is there a revenue side that's associated, or is it just it's less expensive because there's not the infrastructure side?
I think it's a combination of everything.
I think it's all those things that Todd said. It's the same reason why the peninsula, all the cities on the peninsula have been adding jobs by the oodles and no housing. Over the last 25 years, San Mateo County added 3 jobs for every added housing unit, and Santa Clara County was pretty close to that. And San Francisco actually did quite well by comparison. We actually didn't do any worse than we ever did in the past. It's the rest of the region kind of found a cash cow and decided to not deal with the housing problem.
And even kind of akin to it, we're working on a project in the South Bay in a very, very high-end community. It had to get it entitled. but pretty much we were told by the city, the product that needs to be delivered is for empty nesters. We really do not want to add any children to the school system. And this is one of the top, most expensive communities in the Bay Area. It did not get approved.
Wow. Yeah, like, wow. You know, I mean, as we're kind of getting close to 4:30 here and kind of trying to wrap this up and bring all of these various threads together, you know, our membership, our Realtor members are out there talking with people that own homes and want to own homes every day. And they're as frustrated as you are and as we are. So as we're having those conversations with them, what are the one or two things we should be asking them to do or engaging them in that can positively move the home ownership and affordability conversation forward in San Francisco from your point of view? And anyone want to start? Or I'll just pick someone at random?
Actually.
All right, thanks, Darlene.
I hope if people are going to buy a home and they become citizens, that they vote. Whenever I hear people complain about, you know, so-and-so passing a certain legislation or that is not helping them, I'm saying, did you vote? Get active, get involved, get engaged. I mean, don't complain about something you had nothing to do. I mean, you didn't do anything about it beforehand, so.
And I think one of the things I've heard up here today is honestly, don't even wait for it to come to a vote, but the engagement needs to be happening, honestly, like with a neighborhood association. So one of the best places probably for our membership and our homeowners and clients is to be involved is in neighborhood groups, yes?
You know, I think the other thing is, though, educating yourself. Like, really understand, like, there's a story about why San Francisco is so expensive and the housing. And, you know, and this is something before I became the executive director that Corey Smith is in the, Corey, wave. So Corey and the former executive director put together this great PowerPoint called Bay Area 101 that really goes through kind of the last 30 years and to how we've kind of ended up where we are from a housing point of view. And, you know, we don't charge anyone, we just go around and present it. So if anyone is interested in having that, you know, we do it to one person, we'll do it to 100 people. But if anyone's interested, just please see Corey, and we'd be more than happy to come and present that, you know, to your workplace or your neighborhood association.
Awesome. Alan, I know we're coming up on your time shortly. Do you have anything you want to add kind of in terms of
Just to underscore, it's about being involved in your community and supporting projects that are there. I think that's one of the most important ones. Often it's the gadflies that get heard that don't want things to be approved, and they get 3 minutes to speak in a long line, and the advocates get 2 minutes at best. On that note, thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Alan. Really appreciate it.
I would just add a couple of things. One is, I think Todd kind of alluded to this, is infuse, hopefully to the extent that you can, in your clients a kind of a YIMBY attitude about the importance of housing. They're getting a home, other people deserve to get homes too, and that means change in the neighborhood that they are buying a home in, which means, you know, more units down the block, more units next door. Like that is what we need, so that people can have homes and there continue to be homes for sale. I would also add one other thing, two other things. Another is we would love to promote in-law units. We call them the technical term accessory dwelling units, ADUs. I mean, pretty much any property owner in the city, even in the single-family districts, can add an in-law unit now. And it's in a huge, untapped resource of housing in the city, and yeah, it's great.
Actually, I want to give you a sec to plug that a little bit more. That program started out as a pilot in District 8, correct?
Correct.
And it is now expanded to the,
It's now
many of us kind
citywide.
of first touched it when it was just that. So could you just a quick overview of what it actually is, what it impacts, where it is now?
I might get a little bit of the specifics wrong, but it's basically, it's citywide at this point. It doesn't allow you to build a cottage in your backyard per se, but it does allow you to use any built square footage in your building. So if you have unused storage space, or you want to convert your garage, or whatever, you just want to carve out, you know, an extra, you know, family room or whatever downstairs, like, you can do that and you can add a unit. Hopefully the next frontier will be cottages at some point, but we're not quite there yet. But we're already seeing hundreds of applications come in citywide to add units to buildings, and it's not just in single-family homes. I mean, multi-unit buildings can do this as well, and they can add more than one unit. And so, you know, anytime people are transacting buildings, we would love to promote that because it's a way to bring in more revenue and to help people afford their homes or their buildings. And the last thing, and this is not about what necessarily what you can all do individually, but maybe as an organization, the planning department, as well as probably other researchers, would love access to the MLS. And it is the treasure trove of housing data. If you want your government to make informed decisions based on actual data, we need access to it because it doesn't really exist otherwise. We're not out there, we're not going to steal your business, we're not out there to sell homes, but it has data on, obviously historical data on sales prices and unit sizes and unit amenities and all those sorts of things. And we don't, to be honest, we don't know a lot about the housing stock that's out there. We have 350,000 housing units in the city, and we know very little about what those units are, how many bedrooms are in them, and all sorts of things, what they're renting for, what they're selling for. Like, we have very little data, and it's not just about building new units, it's about managing our existing housing stock and finding out like what kind of units do families live in, what are seniors living in, how can we manage the housing stock better, and we're just kind of like stabbing in the dark these days because we don't have that data.
We can absolutely engage with you on that, and we'll have those conversations. Absolutely. Thank you.
That's my pitch. Thank you.
Yes, yes. So we heard you. loud and clear. What else? Christy?
I think everything I've thought about has been said. I mean, in terms of the individual level, I think it is about getting engaged in community plan processes and community groups, in voting, being educated. The ADUs are a great point. I just spoke at the Santa Clara County Association of Realtors to talk about ADUs, in-law units. That's how I usually talk about them. Nothing else.
One of the final question here is, we've talked a lot about the neighborhood and all, the state local interplay. Kind of one of the big pieces here is the possibility is as of right, kind of being approved and really limiting, what a local jurisdiction can do if a project meets the zoning and planning code. How do people feel about that? I mean, is it just, are we placing too much hope on it? Is it really not going to solve as much of a problem? Is it just, is it a unicorn? It's never actually going to happen. What are the thoughts around that one?
Well, I didn't get to ask the senator what his handicap on the odds of it passing at this point. Last I heard, it was better than 50% chance. So I think in the next couple weeks will be kind of formative. I think we're just at the planning department kind of figuring out what to do about it. I mean, one thing that it would do would basically say, if project meets the objective standards of your code and your design standards, then it would get approved. Well, we have a lot of, as we said, like over 1,000 pages of code, but we do actually rely a lot on uncodified kind of design guidelines and that kind of more informal process to shape projects, and so it would force us to codify a lot of these things, and so we'll have to do that. So we'd have some work ahead of us. The actual impact on San Francisco is a little bit hard to read at this point because it's still a little bit in flux, and the last I looked at the legislation, it may not be enforced in San Francisco as much as it would be in other places, because as Todd said, we actually do meet our RHNA targets in terms of market rate housing, and so it might only end up in expediting affordable housing, except maybe in kind of immediate post-recession years.
Any other comments on that one, kind of from any other perspectives?
Spur has always been very supportive of that. I think that in San Francisco's complicated process and the way we're set up, that there are obviously some nuances that need to be dealt with, but it just makes a lot of sense that if it's conforming to decisions, things that we've already said we want that are in our code, that you should be allowed to build it.
So kind of as we wrap things up here, I just want to give each of you a chance to say if you've got anything you didn't get a chance to say, or any kind of your passion plea to our membership, or kind of final thoughts on this from your organization's perspective. And we'll start on this side with Christy.
I think going back to the area plan conversation, I think that it's been one, it has, even if there's some sand in the gears now for Eastern neighborhoods, I think it is we need to do more of them. that they have been a good process. Market Octavia, I think, has been pretty a success in most people's eyes in terms of creating a lot of well-designed housing, a lot of affordable housing, as well as market rate housing, thoughtful things happening in the public realm. The Market Hub is coming out of that, and I think that will add a lot more to the streetscape improvements and accommodating more growth and more benefits together. I think that the packaging of let's have the conversation up front about what does the community need to see and how much growth are we going to accommodate here is something that it takes a long time. It takes too long here, but I think that it's worth having that conversation up front so it doesn't face every single project as it goes along. And developers do see the benefit in having done that environmental review up front and narrowing what they need to do for their individual projects. So I would look to the planning department to do set up some more area plans.
All right, Todd.
I think I wanted to, when we were talking about millennials, I think the intersection of millennial housing and family housing is really interesting. That there's this big conversation going on right now in San Francisco, pushing for family housing, 3+ bedrooms and stuff like that. And currently today in San Francisco, many 3+ bedrooms are 3 millennials living there. They're expensive, families, a lot of times families tend to prefer 2 bedrooms. It's more flexible and things like that. And there's kind of like this chicken or egg conversation going on. Like if we continue to build 3+ bedrooms, will families finally, come to San Francisco? As people may be aware that we are for a major city, we have the smallest percent population of under age 18 of any major city. And so it's just kind of this interesting, when we think about building for families, are families actually living in those units? And I think today the answer is no, and then I don't know what the answer will be 10 or 15 years from now, but I just think it's an interesting kind of intersection of housing.
Darlene?
Don't know where to start, but I think there's a misnomer in many ways in that, hey, the Chinese have money, they're going to come in and buy the most expensive piece of property they see. I think a lot of it is clustering when they know their friends are buying in a certain area that they're going to come and buy as well. I think what I would like to see among brokers in general is more collaboration, because the thing is that one thing for sure, Chinese buyers do not like to pay brokers fees. So, I'm just asking, making an appeal, work together with friends, right? Make sure, and I think it's, right? I mean, buyers and sellers brokers could work more collaboratively. I think that you'll be able to probably achieve more, because it's just, I don't know, it's just my appeal.
Awesome, thank you. Joshua?
Well, I'll echo what Todd just said. We're starting to think more about more creative housing typologies than typical. In the past, particularly in the 20s and 40s and 50s, a lot of people lived, working class, middle class people lived in what we now call SROs, or residential hotels, and it wasn't like a sketchy or low class thing to do. And we're starting to think about how maybe that's a prototype that could help fill this housing need, and thinking about also other kinds of co-housing and co-living opportunities, and what does that look like in the modern age to maybe fill a lot of the need for young millennials kind of moving into the city. And the other kind of bigger frontier, which also deals with our existing housing stock, is we're kind of we're dealing with kind of a rampant issue, but just displacement, and there's a real toxic environment in the city with just people being displaced from their homes, and every story about some senior or family tossed out on the street as a result of an Alice Act or something like that really just creates a super toxic environment for talking about housing, and it's just we just have to work collectively to try to kind of put an end to, as much as we can, to the real kind of egregious acts on those, and work to keep people in their homes so that we can build a lot more housing, and we're not kind of working in this environment where we're either cannibalizing our existing housing stock or just kind of can't have a conversation because people are too upset about things going on in their neighborhoods.
Awesome. So if you would all join me in thanking our incredibly smart, talented panelists.